Okay, so remember when I said a creepy episode of Doug, like in the voting area, and then people voted for it? Well, I kind of realized after watching a few episodes of Doug that Doug is not really a creepy show, it's more just really weird. It's just odd, and it's odd in a good way. I've always talked a lot of shit about the show, and I know a lot of other people are like, oh, Doug was so boring, but I will say, it's a comfortable show to watch, except sometimes it's fucking weird. You have Doug going like, man, I'm 13, or way younger, I think he's like 10. He's like, I'm 11, and my life's hard, and this is my life as a kid. Then it's like he has this weird fantasy sequences that all fucked up and strange, and you're like, how the fuck does he come up with this shit? I mean, I would argue that's the creepy part of Doug, is his fantasy sequences are really fucking bizarre. But even then, I mean, I don't know. Like, when I said a creepy episode of Doug, it's not gonna be creepy like how the Rugrats was, like, all fucked up. It's gonna be more like, okay, that was a little off-putting. I don't know what to make of that. So here's an off-putting, not super creepy, but still weird and uncomfortable episode of Doug.
That's me.
A few things before I get into it. I like to Google some shit about the stuff I'm gonna talk about Doug, and I found the wiki, and oh my god, I love wikis for this reason. Okay, first off, here's this fucked up picture of Patti. It looks nothing like her. Somebody, edited it? I don't know what happened. I don't know why this was her picture. Somebody went on paint and gave her more hair and a purple sweater. And it's weird is she's the only one that's like that. None of the other pictures of Doug are like that. So there's that. And the other thing that I found that really made me laugh was I read the bio on Roger, just because, I don't know, I had time. And Billy Wez, the guy who voices Roger, was like, Roger's in jail. Everybody's kind of mean to Doug when you watch the show. Everybody's kind of a dick to him sometimes. I'd say not really Patti. And Skeeter, not really. Except in one episode, Skeeter's kind of an asshole. Although Doug's an asshole, so I can see why. But they're, making a comic together, and Skeeter's like, Quailman's fucking boring. And it's like, wow, Skeeter, it's true, but damn. But, everybody's kind of a dick to Doug, and I don't understand why. It's like they know he has an anxiety problem, which I will stand by the fact that Doug has some kind of anxiety problem. I mean, the amount of anxiety he has as a child is, so bad. He's just, stressed out all the fucking time about really fucking off-the-wall shit, or somebody plants the seed, Roger comes by just to insult Doug. It's the first episode ever made. And he's like, hey, you're going to the dance with Patti, but you can't fucking dance. Ha ha ha. And then he leaves, and that's all Roger came to do is, to stress him out. So, I've talked about Roger a little bit, but, I will say Roger's just a school bully. He's like Doug's age. No, he's not. He's a little older than Doug, I guess. He got held back. But anyway, I read the wiki, so I know. I'm actually gonna talk about Mr. Bone. Because out of all the characters, fuck Mr. Bone. He is probably the biggest asshole in that show. I don't give a shit. First off, he's the assistant principal, but he's basically just the principal. Why they made him assistant principal, I actually don't understand. He's voiced by Don Knotts, the late Don Knotts. You know Don Knotts, right? He, was really famous. He was in the Andy Griffith Show. He was in that Fish movie, I think. Here's a fact, I didn't know it was Don Knotts this whole time until I sat there and I was like, oh my god, that's Don Knotts, and my sister was like, yes. And I was like, I just didn't realize it was him. I'm gonna talk about a specific episode. I think it's called, oh god, what is it called? It's called something fucked up. Oh, it's called Doug's Shock Therapy. Already the title puts a certain thought in your head, why is it called that? It's in, I believe, season 3. Came out in 1993, holy shit, I was 1. Okay, so I'm gonna give you some backstory. The first time I watched Mr. Bone's Shock Therapy, or Doug's Shock Therapy, I was hanging out with my sister and we were, just chilling as adults. And, I was like, you want to watch some Doug? And she was like, no, I don't. And I was like, come on, it would be a good time. to watch some Doug. And she's like, I don't think it would be ever a good time to watch Doug. And I was like, come on. And she's like, fine. And she's like, but I get to pick the episode because, you know, my sister has this crazy memory where she remembers all the episodes. And she's going through the episodes and she's like, ooh, this one's good. Mr. Bone gets amnesia and thinks he's a kid. And I was like, okay. And I went into the episode thinking Mr. Bone is gonna get amnesia at some point and think he's a child. Now, I've seen that plot done plenty of times. In fact, there's a Rugrats episode where Stu falls off the roof, gets amnesia, and he thinks he's a baby. So I just thought, okay, typical episode, whatever. Move on. I throw it on, and it starts out. In class, they're all working on cards for Mr. Bone who's in the hospital. Doug's literally like, there's good news. Mr. Bone's been out all week. The bad news, he's in the hospital. And I'm like, why did Doug phrase it like that? Ah, thank God my piece of shit principal is in the fucking hospital all week. Didn't want to deal with him. And Doug has a skateboard in this episode. I don't know if he has a skateboard usually, but in this episode, it's really important he has a skateboard. Miss Wingo's like, hey, could someone... I like Miss Wingo's voice. Could someone, hey, Doug. She's like, hey, can somebody volunteer to, take this card tray to Mr. Bone in the hospital? And all the kids leave, but Doug being like, a stupid asshole is still working on his card. And she's like, thanks for volunteering, Doug. And he's like, oh no. He's like, go to the hospital. And then it cuts to the title, right? And it's like, first off, like, already Doug's building this up to be worse than it will be. Like, I don't know why he already has anxiety about doing this. Like, he's already stressed out about going to see Mr. Bone in the hospital. He's, you know, like, okay, I gotta mentally prepare myself. So then he's in the hospital, and he's like, oh no, the hospital gives me the creeps. And then he has like this is creepy. This is relevant and creepy. He has a fantasy sequence where he like walks in on Mr. Bone standing by the window and his back is turned and there's bandages on his head and he's like, Mr. Bone, I'm here to give you this thing. And Mr. Bone's like, check this out. And he fucking rips off the bandages and then his head's all creepy and wrinkly in the back of his head and there's eyes sticking out. And he's like, now I can see what you guys are doing behind my back. And he's like, ah. It's like, why did he go there? So anyway, the real world is not that. And he goes in, and Mr. Bone's like in his fucking deathbed. You know, he's like laying there like, Doug, is that you? And Doug's like, yeah, Mr. Bone, I'm here to give you something. And he's like, oh, what is it? And like, for some reason, Doug had the card tree hidden behind his back. I don't know if he was planning on surprising Mr. Bone, but the way he presented it, the card tree's behind his back and the skateboard's in the front. Remember the skateboard? And Mr. Bone's like, oh, a skateboard, thanks, Doug. And Doug's like, wait a minute, that's not what I meant to give you. And he's like, oh, thank you. Everybody just gives me that stupid card tree usually. And he's like, oh. And the nurse comes in, she's like, okay, time to get your wart removed. He's been in the hospital for a whole fucking week and he just had to get a wart removed? And why was he acting like he's on his deathbed? And he's like, no, I don't want to go. And then he leaves. And then Doug's like, oh, this was really just as stressful as I thought it would be. Already, this is really whack because when I was watching this episode with my sister, I'm waiting for him to get amnesia. Now, I'm gonna give you a spoiler. He never gets amnesia. The next day, Doug's like fucking bitching to Skeeter, and Skeeter's like, oh god, this shit again about his fucking skateboard. And then, fucking suddenly, Mr. Bone comes cruising down the hall on Doug's skateboard. And it's really just as cringy as you think it would be. He's like, cowabunga. It's just bad. And, Doug's like, oh, Mr. Bone, I want to talk to you about my skateboard. He's like, meet me in my office, Doug. Because that's kind of Don Knotts, right? It's me, Mr. Bone. Follow me. But he doesn't follow me. It cuts to him knocking on his door later. And, Mr. Bone pulls a prank and, like, fucking golf balls fall on Doug. And it's like, suddenly he has arcade machines and a bunch of skateboards in his office. And this is, like, literally the next day. So, in that time frame after he got his wart removed, which took him a whole fucking week to do, he somehow got, like, a bunch of arcade machines and skateboards and put them in his office in time for Doug to see. Doug, like, walks in and he's like, you saved my life, Doug! And Doug's like, huh? And he's like, when they had to put me under, I was scared. Because they had to put him under for the wart. And he talks about how when he was unconscious, he was on the skateboard and he was gliding through time and back to his childhood. And he's back with all his old childhood friends. And he emphasizes that everybody likes him again. Which makes me kind of think Mr. Bone really has no life or friends. And he's like, I just want to live and be young again, except in the Mr. Bone voice. He's like, I'm just gonna be my young self now. So when I was watching with my sister, I was like, hey, when does he get amnesia? And she's like, you know what? I don't fucking know. And he starts like regressing in the episode, and it dawns on us he's never gonna get amnesia, and it's fucked up and weird. And he kind of makes Doug's life a living hell. I mean, all Doug did was, like, accidentally have to be the one to give him the card tree. And that was enough for Doug to be, like, in this fucking awful situation with Mr. Bone. In fact, he kept thinking, why me? Why me? And it's like, I don't know, Doug. This is pretty fucked up. He gets pretty fucking hard to deal with. He's, like, canceling school randomly. He's like, intercom. And Miss Wingo's like, what? But it's only 11:30. Was that the Miss Wingo voice I was doing? He actually argues with Miss Wingo over the intercom like as if he has fucking bugs inside that fucking classroom.
That's right, I love your classroom, Miss Wingo.
He dismisses class and all the kids are excited. But then he, like, overhears them going like, whoa, let's go to the Honker Burger. And he's like, wait up for me, kids. And they're like, oh no. And they're like, we gotta go. And Doug gets stuck with him again. And he, like, goes to the fucking Honker Burger with Mr. Bone. Have you ever dealt with someone who's impossibly immature for their age in public and you want to die? Like, you're embarrassed for them. He was doing some fucking really cringy shit in the Honker Burger. And, like, Doug just is, like, secondhand embarrassment. And everybody's, like, looking at them like, what the fuck? Why is this 40-something-year-old man doing this? I thought he got amnesia. I wasn't expecting him to suddenly just be really fucking unstable. The pattern continues, and he keeps canceling school, and he keeps doing all these other things. And it gets to a point where the other kids want Doug to hang out with Mr. Bone because it means no school for them. And Doug's like, oh my god, I guess. Because, like, Doug's a fucking pushover. He'll just do it because they asked him. Mr. Bone wants to go to Suicide Mountain. And Doug's like, oh no, that's for professional skaters. And he's like, don't be such a chicken. And they go. Fucking Mr. Bone's decked out in professional skateboard gear. And it's like a fucking horrible steep drop. And then Doug kind of realizes, like, if he doesn't stop this trend's gonna continue for the rest of his life, which means Mr. Bone's gonna be there when he gets married to Patti. Mr. Bone's gonna be there when he's old. Like, Mr. Bone's just gonna haunt him for the rest of his fucking life, despite the age difference. Like, it's just gonna be this terrible situation. Doug's like, I ain't fucking going down this thing. And fucking Mr. Bone's like, how dare you? And then he falls down it, and he ends up back in the fucking hospital. And Doug, again, has to go to the hospital and give him flowers. And, he's like, the whole class pitched, because I guess flowers are really expensive. It looked like a shitty fucking bouquet to me, but whatever. Bouquet? Anyway, and then, like, Mr. Bone's back to normal, and he's, like, pissed off at, like, the world again, and pissed off at children, and he's, like, excited to, like, be a hard ass again at school, and Doug leaves. And then it's like things are back to normal, but nobody once questions the fact that fucking Mr. Bone had this midlife crisis and took it out on Doug. Like, when I originally watched Doug, I kind of thought he was like this overreactive, whiny kid, but now that I watch him, like, no, people really do fucking push their problems on him a lot, and I think it's just because he's willing to deal with it, but, secretly, he's so stressed out the whole fucking time. I don't know, it's not a creepy episode. I drew Robo Bone because he is creepy, right? Alright, that's all I had to say. Bye!